What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And we are, of course, streaming on YouTube at the Team 980, where you'll be able to see Anthony Haney in a moment. And Anthony, I'm just going to stall here for a moment while I finish setting everything up for the show that it absolutely 1,000% should be set up before the show, because I would like to capture your reaction when I tell you why I'm not completely, I'm not in the best headspace here as we start the show. Why I am seemingly, and you would be like, wow, you seem a little flustered. That is correct. I am a little flustered, actually. And the reason is what I'm going to tell you in about 15 seconds once I hit 2 more clicks here on all of the things. So as Anthony, you know, and as much of the audience knows, on Fridays, I do the show from home, which is relevant to the story, because I was just downstairs being a responsible human being, adult member of my household, putting away our groceries. And so, Anthony, what I was doing was put all the stuff on the counter, right? And then let's not leave the fridge open. So let's get everything out. And then I was like, let me just push these bags that I used to carry the groceries up into our condo out of the way. And what I didn't realize was that, there was a candle underneath the bags that I was pushing onto the floor. And so the candle, which was encased in glass, fell and shattered all over my kitchen floor. So that mess is waiting on me downstairs in my home. And there is something about the sound of shattered glass that is so terrifying that it stays with you for a second. So I am composing myself, because I know that there are little glass shards in my kitchen waiting to murder my or my wife's feet, and I haven't had a chance to clean them up yet fully, and also because I heard that sound of shattered glass. I'm thankful that it was just a candle, because I was like, oh God, did Rachel have something nice on the counter that I just broke? Like, I literally did not know what glass had just shattered. The fact that it is merely a candle was a relief, but oh my God, I'm stressed. We know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that's. No, I honestly, had that happened in the moment, had someone given me the applause, I probably would have felt better about things, because I still feel like I've obviously told Rachel that this happened, because she's out right now, and I don't want her to come home and like la di da di da, all of a sudden there's glass. So like, one, do not take your shoes off yet the second you walk in the door. Two, depending on how some things go that we have planned during the show, my ability to clean up that mess could be very limited before she arrives. And thus, I don't want her to walk in and go, what the hell happened? So, you young whippersnapper kids out there, if you ever get to host a radio show and you have a hard start time, it's not a podcast. You can't push it back 15 minutes. No. You're hosting a real big boy or big girl radio show. Don't break glass in your home 10 minutes before, or at your office. Because God, if I had done this at the office, that would have been stressful too. You're just like, yeah, kind of like, I guess you just go to the boss's office and be like, hey, I know this isn't your job, but do you want me to clean the glass or do the show that you pay me for? So, well, you're vitally important. Can't have you not in the right chair. Actually, yeah. That is the kind of thing that he would do. Is he going, hell no? I feel like no, here, hold on. Is Rooster in front of a hot microphone? Does he have headphones? Can he hear me? Hi, I'm good. Better now that we're having fun with this, which is why I needed to do it. I did not know that you would be roped into this. So both you're welcome and I'm sorry. I feel like your response would be extremely helpful while complaining about it the entire time. Uh-huh. So so I broke a glass candle in my kitchen. And my thought was like, I was making a joke, like, hey, kids, don't break glass 10 minutes before show starts. And I was like, God, if I had done that at the office, it would be in some ways worse. And then Anthony said, do you think Chris would help clean up? And I said, yes, that's actually the exact kind of thing Chris would do. But my thought is you would do it while being, how come no one else around here ever cleans up? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, which is totally fair. It's just like the problem is you can't both clean up the mess and do a show. So someone's got to have to help, or we have to at least put up some kind of sign, be like, idiot host will come back and clean up his mess later. He wouldn't do it. And also, here's the thing about cleaning up glass. You need someone who you trust to clean up glass. Otherwise, someone's going to wind up with a shard in their foot. And I don't know that Linnell and attention to detail and cleaning up glass level, those all go together. Okay. Okay. That's probably a good idea for all of us. Hey, Chris, have a great weekend, buddy. You're, thank you. That's okay. We're gonna see if anybody's out there driving and wants to chime in next. That is how we intended to start our show today, but then I just had to kind of get that off my chest and get in a better frame of mind. I don't think that was the brand, but like, yeah, it was a nice candle of some kind. Yeah, well, the candle's in just fine shape. It's the glass that was surrounding it. We can still light the thing on fire and it'll smell nice. It just we need a different encasing for it. Thanks, thanks. I will do that. That's Chris Russell, everybody. As Chris was referencing, we had Joe Theismann on the show yesterday, and he said something about 15 minutes into our interview that I was like, oh, that's going to get some attention. And boy, was I right on that one. Didn't take an exact genius to figure that one out. Joe said that Jayden Daniels shouldn't play in the preseason. One, do I agree? Two, do you agree? I'll give you my take and then take yours on the phones at 301-230-0980. Next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always alive as well on the free Odyssey app. And yesterday on this here radio show, we had the 1983 NFL MVP and Super Bowl champion, Washington legend, Joe Theismann on the show. Joe knows a thing or two about quarterbacks. Obviously, not only was he a great player, like a lot of us, if you're my age, you grew up watching Joe on Sunday Night Football as an analyst too. So he's been around the game in a lot of capacities for a long time. And so even though Joe and I have disagreed on any number of things over the years, I always value his opinion. And as we're talking about Jayden Daniels and where his and many of your beloved Commanders are moving forward, Joe had this to say about Daniels when it comes to the preseason. And I said in the course of our conversation, I should say, that Daniels shouldn't play in the preseason. I asked, like, hey, let's double click on that. Why do you say that? And here's what Joe had to say.
And the other part of it is how am I going to be able to evaluate the guys that I'm looking at to fill out the roster if I don't have them out on the field? And if I put the guys that don't have experience out there with him, I go to the risk of getting them killed. So, it's sort of a quandary, but in my mind, it's no question a decision that I don't take the chance of putting him out on that football field and having something happen to him in the preseason.
So I fully understand the case that Theismann's making here, and I don't really disagree with any of the points that he's making. What I think is missing here is the context of what he doesn't bring up, which is every step of the process is a little bit faster and a little bit more complex and a little bit realer, to use a word that may not actually be a word, realer, closer to actual NFL football. And so, yes, is there a higher risk of injury in the preseason than, say, in a practice? Yes, because it's the only place where a quarterback, before you get into an actual regular season game, doesn't have that special jersey on that says he can't get hit. And so as he goes through the spring, like Jayden's back there, and yeah, there could be eventually people at his feet. And in training camp, there will certainly be some people at his feet because there'll be some live stuff that's not live for quarterbacks, but is live for everybody else. And if, someone falls down in front of him, how does he handle that? And there'll be a pass rush around him, and they can't tackle him, but he's going to have to deal with limbs flying everywhere. But he doesn't have to actually worry about getting hit because he's still got that yellow jersey. Against the two teams that they're going to do the joint practices, it's closer to real football because it's a different team. It's a different scheme. You don't know the script potentially as well as when it's your own defense going against you. It's different players. So like tendencies and tells all of a sudden become a different type of thing where if you figured out a certain DB, let's say Jayden Daniels figures out something about Quan Martin and can exploit it all camp long. Okay. What happens when that's not Quan Martin or Emmanuel Forbes or Michael Davis or whoever, right? These are the kinds of things that get more real as you get closer to actual football. But the one thing that doesn't change, to Joe's point, but also kind of against Joe's point, is the quarterback can't get hit. And so once you get to that point where it's real football and the quarterback can get hit, what is the risk reward of playing that guy in the preseason? And this is a conversation we've had multiple times, I think, over the last couple of years as different offenses have been installed and new quarterbacks have been in town every single year since Kirk Cousins left. is what is the value of a series, of 2 series. And it's not just the quarterback, because to Joe's point as well, if you don't want your O-lineman to get hurt, you don't want Sam Cosmi to risk injury at right guard, do you really want to have to put him out there to protect Jayden? Or do you trust him behind a backup offensive line? And we've seen variations over the years. We've seen Sam Howell get out there behind some backups on the offensive line. We've seen different quarterbacks with not Trent Williams at left tackle, but the rest of the starting O-line and your starting quarterback out there, going back to when Trent was wearing the burgundy and gold. We've seen these things before, and the problem is there is no clear-cut answer. Anyone that says Joe Theismann is 100% wrong, I can't believe he said that, blah, 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 you're not being honest. It's not a telltale 100% right or wrong thing here. With that said, I disagree with Joe. I do think that getting a series, 2 series, 3 series in the preseason is worth it for a young quarterback to experience that, to go out there and get the adrenaline flowing, to understand what even preseason speed is like. It's not regular season speed, but it is faster than a joint practice. It is faster than your own practices. So there is a ton of value there, even if it's a small sample size, just so that when he gets out there for the first time and the bullets are flying, for real, that it's not new.
And that on the stream.
That is the thing that we know changes the calculation for those first couple of games. It's like, okay, we need an adjustment period. Well, not if you played some in the preseason. And I think we started to see the tides turn last year. I think we started to see that there is like a downside for a lot of these guys. It's one thing if you're Matt Stafford in LA and Sean doesn't play anybody, because Stafford's been in this league for over a decade. But for a rookie, it's beneficial. For the young players, it's beneficial. For Sean and Matt in LA, they've been together now for 5 years or something like that? It's not a new system. They know the verbiage. They know everything. For Jayden Daniels, it's all new. And so while I think maybe the most compelling argument to not start Daniels in the preseason and not give him any time in the preseason would be, we don't care how many games we win this year because we know this ain't the year for that. And if it takes a little bit longer to get going, that's fine. And you want to just accept that, but say, hey, we're not going to put him out there in the preseason. All risk is going to be for games that matter. Fine. But I don't think that's how you operate. And I don't think that's how you build a winning culture. I don't think that's how you build good habits. I think when the games matter, you need to play them like they matter. And in order to do that, you can't treat them, and Joe said this later in his answer, like a preseason game. Of course, there's a build over the course of a season. The entire offense is going to build. They'll add stuff. And game plan specific, things will change week over week. Teams will make adjustments. You have to adjust to them. You adjust, they adjust back. You adjust to that. Like, that is the constant chase of the NFL. There's no such thing as figuring it out. Even late in his career, when he was still awesome, Brady had games where he got confused in certain things. He was just able to adjust so fast that most people didn't notice. And so for Jayden Daniels, I do think I would play him a minimal amount in the preseason. Also understanding that I'm going to have to play everybody else because I want to play everybody else. And I also think the last thing I'll say here is I think Dan Quinn and Adam Peters, but really Quinn is the one on the ground level here, want a culture of competition, which means we put our best out there and we try to win. And not that we're going to go crazy because we won a preseason game, but winning is better than losing. And I think when you look at a program, and I'm going to use that word here, very college-y, but I'm going to use it, a program like Baltimore. You look at the organization they've built and the football team that they've built and how it's consistently won over time. Is the preseason winning streak that they've had forever, or that they had forever until I think it finally got broken last year, is that something that is important to the franchise because it's a preseason winning streak? No. But it's a symptom of the disease, and the disease is they're competitive as hell. and they compete, and it's up and down the roster, and there's a standard that they uphold all the time. And so to be able to get out there, compete, test your habits against others, get exposure, especially for a fairly young team and guys that haven't played together, the chance to knock off the rust without the consequences of a win or loss. We'll talk about this again, I'm sure, in August. But I would absolutely play Jayden Daniels some small amount in the preseason, just so when he gets out there for real, in his full uniform, full shoulder pads, running out the tunnel at Commander's Field for the first time, or on the road for the first time, it's not actually, as an NFL player, the literal first time. We'll take your calls next. 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. Would you play Jayden Daniels in the preseason? Joe Theismann says no. I say some. What say you? 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. 301-230-0980 is our phone number on the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up at 5 p.m., our pal Chase Hughes joins us from Las Vegas ahead of the Wizards opening the NBA's Summer League tonight. Number 1 versus number 2 pick, Zachary Rissache and Alex Sarr going head-to-head with the rest of the Wizards. Clinton Yates later on in the show as well. He joins us from Dallas, Major League Baseball All-Star festivities this weekend and obviously into the All-Star game next week. But right now, taking your calls on Joe Theismann's thoughts on our show yesterday. By the way, if you missed the full interview with Joe, definitely worth your time this weekend. Just search The Hoffman Show in your favorite podcast feed. Scroll back a little bit. I wish there was Anthony, we can't pin a podcast to the top of our feed, can we? That's not a thing that like Apple and Spotify and them let you do, can you?
Not to my knowledge. I don't think that's possible.
I think the only way to do it is if we like put it as a trailer, and I don't know how to do that. But if we can figure it out, I think that's one we should pin to the top, if you will.
All right.
So we may try to make that easy for people. So we're doing our best with the technologies. If you know how to pin a podcast in behind the scenes podcast services, holler at us. Anyway, 301-230-0980. Would you start Jayden Daniels in the preseason? Let's go to Gary in Upper Marlboro. Gary, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Thanks for taking my call. I would never disagree with a borderline Hall of Fame quarterback. Okay, he's been through it, so I don't want to disagree with Joe T. I just think with this kid's style of play, it's an unnecessary risk. You can tell him all you want, hey, don't run the football, don't take any chances, but this is going to be his first action in the NFL, and instincts take over. You're not going to have him out there playing a long, extended period of time anyways. So, but I am curious to know, I don't know if you know whether or not some of the other young quarterbacks played in the preseason that had some success, like the kid from Houston last year. I don't know if they kept him out.
I do know, because we looked it up during the break. That's called being prepared, Gary. CJ did play, and not only did he played in all 3 games last year. Meanwhile, Joe Burrow played only in his rookie season. He threw 1 pass. So there's definitely a mix of both options and outcomes when it comes to precedent here.
Yeah. So, I think with his style of play, it's probably best to sit him because, like I said, instincts take over, and he's going to be excited to be out there. I just think it's better to sit him.
All right, Gary, thanks for the call. 301-230-0980. The instincts thing is interesting, and he is a guy that can take off and run. He also is a guy that will sit in the pocket and potentially take a hit. And those two things, obviously, is what you're trying to avoid. I also think there's some element of control with play calling here, and I think that this is classic Hoffman here, Anthony, where I'm going to get a little more nuanced and get into the weeds a little bit. So here we go. More calls. Continue to get them in. 301-230-0980. But just because you play him doesn't mean you have to expose him, right? Joe Burrow threw 1 pass. You could have him hand the ball off 3 times and then get out of there. Like preseason game 1. Hey, we're just going to have him hand the ball off 3 times. And hopefully we don't get a first down. And if we do, we're just going to keep running it. And if we need to throw a screen, we'll throw a screen. And if we want to have him try to make a throw where there actually is a chance that he could get hit, we're going to tell him, like, hey, we're throwing the ball deep here, and we're just going to chuck it, and I don't care if it's double coverage. Like, there's things you can do to control the pressure that he would potentially be under while allowing him to feel the game. Because that's the thing ultimately you're trying to get out of this. It's not, hey, we want you to go out and work on all your processing, and we're going to, because you're not going to see complex defenses. Like, that's the thing. It's not like you're getting real game experience because defenses don't game plan and they're not showing anything but vanilla looks. And we know if all Jayden Daniels had to do was break down, mentally and then execute physically throws against vanilla cover 2, vanilla cover 4, vanilla cover 1, vanilla cover 3, man-to-man, like cover 0 type stuff. He could do that. He could do that today. He doesn't need training camp. He didn't need mini camp. Like, that's basic stuff. What's hard about the NFL is when all that stuff starts to look the same. That you got players dropping out of nowhere, and all of a sudden it looks like cover 2, but that's the corner. It's cover 2 invert. I can see that on the slides afterwards. I can see that on the film. But in real time from the pocket, dang, I thought it was cover 4 because the cornerback was going deep, but actually he was covering a half instead of a quarter. Like, that stuff gets complicated real quick. And you have these amoeba, like, zone match type stuff that you'll see against Philly twice this year because Vic Fangio is the godfather of that stuff. But half the league is running it at this point. So there's just a layer of complexity and nuance and difficulty that you're not going to get in the preseason. So to ask him to then do a bunch of passing stuff and expose him to the pass rush and, oh my God, no one's open, now let me run and maybe I get hit that way. Like, you don't have to do all that. You can get him the adrenaline of being out there, running out the tunnel, taking a snap from under center, having to get the play calls in the huddle, but ultimately handing the ball off 3 times, hoping that Brian Robinson doesn't actually get a first down, and then everybody marches off the field, and you say, good job, Jayden. Back to practice on Monday. 301-230-0980. I think David's on the same page. David, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, thank you. This is the first time I called. I think they should just practice handing the ball off to the running backs and practice with the screen, but he don't have to stand back there to throw it and get hit. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, thanks, David. I think that's all possible. And we've seen that happen before too, right? Like, we'll see them literally just be like, handoff, screen. Some offensive coordinators in recent Commanders history have thought that's an actual sequence of plays that you should do in real life regularly. We're not going to go down those rabbit holes today. No. Not going to bring back the bad memes. But in a preseason game, that's fine. Like, get the ball out, let Jahan get a touch, let Jamison Crowder. Like, if you don't even play Jahan and Terry, fine. Like, throw it to Jamison Crowder. That's fine. Like, throw it to Kaz Allen. I don't care. But let him get one off. And I think that balance of, hey, let's make sure that the first time he sees the field is not the first time he sees the field, but also limiting exposure is probably worth it. And do you come down after listening to the arguments, if you will, one way or another?
Where I've landed is, I think I lean more towards where Joe T was at, but I say that because I'm looking at the joint practices as, those live game situations that Jayden's going to be exposed to, that he'll be able to like lean on, as opposed to, being out there in the preseason game. So I think having those 2 games is why I am where I am. But I understand, him getting, live game reps, being able to, see a defense that, he's not accustomed to seeing, and just ultimately just getting the reps. So I hear you guys, but I think I'd rather just, save them and just wait till the season rolls around. Just because he's not going to play the third preseason game, and then there's also like a week and a half, 2 weeks before he actually plays a real game. So I feel like the time, are those reps really going to matter that much if he plays in the preseason? Yeah,
well, I think that's the thing. It's like, my argument would be that the reason they matter is so when he gets out there for the first time, it's not actually the first time. And if that's the case and it feels more familiar, like, that could help with nerves. It could help just with like, oh, okay, I understand the speed of the game. I understand how fast that screen happened. I understand the track of the running back, the handoff stuff. This isn't practice pace. I got to really sprint to get this outside zone handoff off, or whatever it is, right? Or like, yeah, okay, let me throw a slant. Let me see the window for real. Like, there are things you can do, quick game, et cetera, that limit exposure in a major way. Yeah. It's not foolproof, but don't limit exposure that exposes him to that. The thing is that I would say is, like, to your point, the joint practice is a game changer. Because in the joint practice, he'll see more complex coverages in the joint practice than he will in a game.
Yep.
So it really is about the adrenaline and like kind of all the, I don't want to call it performative, but the non-football stuff that goes into being a football player that you can get out of the way to an extent. It's always like, if you play in the preseason, are you not going to have jitters when you get out there? Of course, you're probably going to have some. You're like, wow, okay, I really made it. This is my debut. That preseason stuff goes away real fast, but at least it's not all unfamiliar. And again, like I am at a point where it's not that I don't care, but I don't think there's a definitive right answer, and I don't really have a super strong preference. I could probably be convinced that to just sit him, but that is the safe thing, right? Because that's another part of Joe's point is, it's not that big of a deal until it is. What happens if he goes out there and he takes a huge shot, or he twists an ankle or whatever? Even if he just does it on a routine play, Tyler Biadasz steps on his foot, rolls his ankle, and now he's out. Okay, well, that's not going to happen if he does. It could happen in practice, sure, but you can't just not practice ever. But if it happens in a game where you didn't really have to play, that's when all of a sudden it's like, well, now it's easy criticism. Would I do that? No. Would I come out here and be like, how dare they play him? Like, no, y'all heard me in July, and I'm sure we'll have this discussion again, saying, like, I think you should play, so I'm not going to go back on it. It's just acknowledging the risk of what it is, that it's not clear cut. 301-230-0980. We got time for a couple more calls before Chase Hughes joins us coming up at 5 o'clock here on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. And we're taking your calls at 301-230-0980. That is 301-230-0980. Your thoughts on Jayden Daniels and whether or not he should start in the preseason after our conversation yesterday with Joe Theismann. So 301-230-0980. And Anthony, for those that are just tuning in, can we play the Theismann bit one more time, just so that folks can hear what Joe T said yesterday on our show?
Why would you put your starting quarterback out there?
So we had Theismann yesterday, 5 o'clock.
Line. They'll probably play a series, maybe. So you give him a little, his feet a little bit wet. But you don't want him You don't want to risk him out there in a preseason game. Craig, they would tear Dan apart if Jayden got. They would.
You're not wrong. You're 1,000% not wrong.
So where's your risk reward? You give him a chance to grow into the position, and this is going to be with every rookie quarterback that starts. Every and any rookie quarterback that starts. I would be surprised if you see them more than a series, possibly two in the preseasons. You know they're not going to play in the third for sure. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's a big, long period of time before the opener, too, as far as that goes. Do you really risk them out there in the second game? And the other part of it is how am I going to be able to evaluate the guys that I'm looking at to fill out the roster if I don't have them out on the field? And if I put the guys that don't have experience out there with him, I go to the risk of getting them killed. So, it's sort of a quandary, but in my mind, it's no question a decision that I don't take the chance of putting him out on that football field and having something happen to him in the preseason.
So there's a risk that we know. The question is that risk something we think is worth the reward? 301-230-0980. Let's go to Jeff. Jeff, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for taking the call. The fact is the kid has played in the SEC, one of the most, competitive divisions, and in front of thousands of people every Saturday. He is the speed of the game, for goodness sake. So, and let's face it, the NFL, September is now preseason anyway. So if you can get out 1-3, 2-2 in September, you're still in the hunt, and September are the time for him to get his reps behind, like Joe says, the number ones on the offensive line, and we don't risk any injury, and we're on our way. So, no, don't play him at all until September.
So, Jeff, I'm going to play devil's advocate because I don't necessarily disagree, but I disagree enough to actually play devil's advocate in an honest way, not to just be annoying here. So this offensive line is completely new. You don't want them to get reps together in the preseason with him behind them and getting, the calls from him, practicing the communication, all of that. Because what happens in September if all of a sudden, here comes, one of the Tampa rushers because they didn't work on their communication in a live game in the preseason, and all of a sudden there's a free rusher, and that's the one that knocks him out. And it could have been maybe prevented if they had worked on some things a little bit more in the preseason.
Well, I think those things can be handled through practices, inter-squad practices. I think all that can be handled at the professional level without facing an opponent. I think the X's and O's aren't as sophisticated as one would think they're there to be, or we wouldn't see so much success from Stroud and Brock Purdy. If this was rocket science, I don't think you'd see the success of those other guys that we've seen in recent years. And I don't think it's as difficult for Daniels either. And I think that's why you wait, and that's why September's fine.
Jeff, thanks for the call. I do think the X's and O's are that complicated. I think it depends on the offense you came out of. I think it depends on the coach that you have. Like Kyle's obviously Kyle. Bobby Slowick is tremendous. And we'll see what Cliff can do. Cliff is very quarterback friendly. I'm actually not that concerned about the translation and Jayden's abilities to do this. I just think it's a fascinating conversation, probably in part because I don't really think that there is a definitive right answer. I think the other counterpoint I would make to Jeff there is what happens if you miss the playoffs by a game and you maybe could have started one game sharper? Like, that's the risk you run. But also if Jayden gets hurt, then nothing matters. So that's the easy counter argument. Hammer. There you go. Let's go to John in Columbia. John, thanks for calling. You're the last call here, so let's make it a good one here on the Hoffman Show.
Love you, man. Love you. Love your show.
Thank
Everybody, just take a breath. When you're evaluating from a newness, everybody is brand new. You're evaluating. Nobody has a carte blanche. Nobody has a carte blanche to get through. This is ridiculous. You put him out there because I don't care what kind of practices you have. You cannot duplicate game speed. You just can't. You can't. Any profession that you have, if you're a doctor, if you're operating, you have to have practice. You have to have practice on what you're doing so we can evaluate you. I can't let you go in there and do open heart surgery. I don't care how high you were in your medical class unless you start operating and practicing on cadavers so I can see how you stitch, so I can see how you cut, so I can see how you... Come on, man.
So, John, I think that's a fascinating analogy because that is literally life or death. But just taking that part out of it, the life or death versus winning, losing football games, I think there's another problem here. You've already named him for the next 5 years your lead surgeon, right? We know that Jayden Daniels is, and because of the salary cap, right? It's not just like an emotional attachment here. Because of the salary cap and because of the draft capital you used on him, you have basically said for the next 5 years, he is the guy. You've already given him the lead position. And so thus you have a responsibility, yes, to evaluate him, but really I think more so at this point because you've already drafted him. Wouldn't you say the bigger responsibility is to protect him, to make sure that he's available to do the surgery?
And you said it earlier. You protect the play calling. You protect with passing, with your scheme, for your protection scheme. That's what the old regime didn't do. They just set you out there and let you try to get it done on your own. You do things, you scheme it up, you protect it, and that comes with practice too. Let me see how you will recognize your coverage, how you recognize your slides to the left or to the right or to A gap. Come on, man. You've got to be on the field. I didn't say you got to play a whole half. I didn't say you had to play all 3 games, but you got to be on the field so I can evaluate you honestly and those that are around you because you're all growing together.
John, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. And by the way, I pretty much agree. So I think that's the fun of the conversation. The last thing I'll say real quick, and then we'll take our break here at the top of the hour, a.k.a. Right before 5 p.m., a.k.a. top of the hour would be 5 p.m. on the dot because, Anthony, #radio jargon. This all assumes that Jayden's the starter, which I was one of the first people saying like, hey, shouldn't we be talking about this? That he's been the starter the entire time? Isn't that a thing? I mean, maybe I think not that I was like some revolutionary in that, but I was just like, we're still talking about this in a silly way. He's clearly already the starting quarterback. But I would imagine that even with that said, there's a very good chance that Marcus Mariota takes some 1 reps. And we still don't know. Training camp is long. What happens if once they get out there, Jayden doesn't grow at the rate that we expect. He starts to have some weaknesses exposed that we don't see right now. I can't even tell you what those things are, but some stuff starts to pop up. And Marcus Mariota, after a pretty rough spring, comes in and is like, no, I'm good. I'm the good version of Marcus Mariota now, who's not a world beater, but is a low-level NFL starting quarterback, something that Jayden certainly, we think, and there's a bigger conversation and a bad thing that's happened if he doesn't blow past that relatively quickly. So eventually something that Jayden will pass. But what if Marcus Mariota comes out of training camp as the better guy, or as the first week or and a half of training camp is the better guy, and they're not ready to name Jayden the starter for the season yet? Are you not playing Marcus and not playing Jayden? Are you playing Marcus and telling the vet, hey, dude, so there's other factors here that go into it, because you could very easily be like, Jeff Driscoll, you're starting. Sam Hartman, you got the second half. Let's party. You could give Marcus Mariota a quarter and be like, hey, man, sorry, you're the backup. You could go with that. But if they're not ready to name Jayden the starter for the season yet, it feels like a hard sell to keep him out of the preseason. And that is something that I think we should keep in mind, that I'll just tack on as a little bomb here for people to find at the end of the hour. If you just tuned in and you missed the beginning of it all, you can rewind in the Odyssey app, or you can check the Hoffman Show podcast at your leisure this weekend anytime, because you definitely don't want to leave us live right now, because Chase Hughes joins us next from Las Vegas, where not only have we been having coverage all week of USA basketball, although they are now on their plane to Abu Dhabi in a continuation of their prep for Paris, but no, what they've left in their wake is the NBA Summer League, and it starts with the Wizards tonight. Chase is all over it. Our guy Chase Hughes next from Vegas on the Hoffman Show. Didn't we somehow wind up talking about Dylan Brooks yesterday, Anthony? Like I almost went down a Dylan Brooks rabbit hole, but I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm trying to remember
you didn't.
who were we talking with? Or maybe it was when I had Bontemps on earlier this week.
Possibly.
I don't know. We were definitely. I mean, it makes sense. The USA, Canada, the whole deal. But we definitely, or maybe it was during Never Read the Comments, and it was when we were talking about some of the W players, and someone made a Dylan Brooks comparison, and I was like, oh, it was because someone brought up like the Draymond. Maybe it wasn't on the show. I think it was with one of my friends. Someone brought up like Draymond and Dylan Brooks, and like Angel kind of leaning into being the villain. And then I started to go off on Dylan Brooks, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to get suckered into going off on Dylan Brooks in the middle of July. I don't need that in my life.
I'm proud of you.
Thanks.
Yeah, we don't need that. He doesn't need the attention either.
No, he doesn't. You know who deserves attention? The old Washington Wizards. They open up their summer league tonight in Las Vegas. So let's go to Vegas and check in, shall we?
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
And that top story is that the Wizards are kicking off NBA Summer League tonight. As is kind of tradition, they'll do number 1 versus number 2 pick. Zachary Richardson and the Hawks facing Alex Sarr and the Wizards, and Chase Hughes, our buddy from Monumental Sports Network, is there. Chase, what's up, dude?
Not much. In Vegas right now, I'm looking at an ancient Egyptian pyramid and a sphinx and an obelisk. So yeah, there you go.
Appropriate
right
in the middle of the desert. Yeah,
exactly.
Now, before we get to the serious basketball at hand, I must ask. I saw earlier on Twitter you put out a video, as did a couple other media folks who are out there. The Wizards brought their own court and weight room so their guys can have access 24/7. Does this mean that there's also media pickup games when the guys are busy and you guys have free time?
I haven't asked about that, but yes, it's their boundary stone court that you probably remember. It's actually the specifically it's the one that they had for the play-in tournament games, which is sort of like teal and gold and black. So it's sort of an alternate court. But yeah, they still had it handy, and it's not something that you're going to see used, I don't think, ever again in an actual game. So it's like, might as well get some use out of it. And at the hotel that they're staying at, there's a ginormous conference room, big enough to set up a weight room and a full court with baskets. So they've got a pretty good setup.
Now, are they charging rent to other teams to use it as well? Like, or is this just purely for Wizards guys to get up shots while they're out there?
I think it's purely for the Wizards. You know, usually
That's
they
awesome.
have shoot around at Thomas and Max Center where they're going to play tonight. So it was very easy for me because I'm staying close by to where they're staying. So all I had to do was go down a few escalators.
Love that. Well, in Vegas, you can go down a few escalators and you'll wind up in 7 hotels down. Like some of them are just connected like that. But this sounds very convenient. And really, it's about convenience for you, Chase.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of escalators, I went to the Sphere last night, which I'm sure everyone's heard of. But
yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the scale of the escalators in that place.
No.
You feel like you're taking off on a plane. I mean, you go way up in the air. It's crazy.
Oh, that's not. No, I've been to Vegas a couple times since it opened. We are actually there right before it opened, but I have not had a chance to go. Like when we were there for Super Bowl, everyone went to that U2 show, and I wish that I had figured out how to get there because apparently it was the sickest thing that anyone's ever seen. Like even for people that weren't big U2 fans, they were like, "That's the greatest concert I've ever been to." What were you at the Sphere for?
I went to see Dead and Company with John Mayer as the guitarist,
Nice.
which, you don't really get to choose when you're in Vegas who's going to be there, but I was plenty fine with that being the act. And they were amazing. I mean, they played for like 3 hours. The screen was unbelievable. I mean, I suggest anyone who's out here to give it a shot. But just be careful where you buy your tickets, because when they say obstructed view, they mean it, because there's 2 levels of seats and you basically get a good look at the stage or a good look at the screen. And so I had a better look at the stage. So I had to walk around to see the screen because obviously it's massive and that's the big appeal.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's a good scouting report on the Sphere from Chase Hughes, who's out in Vegas, not to cover the Sphere, but to enjoy it as he also covers Summer League basketball. Okay. What do we expect from Sarr? We'll start with him. I think he's so fascinating because there's a lot of options, I think, in terms of what he could be used as at this stage in his basketball development. What do we expect the Wizards to try to do with him during this Summer League session?
Well, on defense, I think it's going to be pretty straightforward. He's the rim protector. He's a 7-footer with a 7'5" wingspan, park in the paint and block shots. But on offense, there is a world of possibilities, even more than I expected coming into this, because I knew he was versatile. I knew he could make plays off the dribble, shoot from the outside, pass a little bit. He's got some unicorn tendencies, but the Wizards plan to try him out with basically everything you can imagine on the offensive end. Like, just for instance, when it comes to pick and rolls, he's going to set screens and roll to the rim. He's going to set screens and step out to shoot threes and pick and pop actions. And he's actually also going to be the ball handler in pick and rolls and run them as if he's a point center, which is not something you see very often, especially with the Wizards. I was looking back at some tracking data to see, like, has any Wizards big man done this in recent years? Sure enough, Kristaps Porzingis did a little bit, but he was here for 2 seasons and only did it 13 total times. So it's not something you see very often from a 7-footer.
No doubt. And this is the beauty of Summer League is you put guys in roles and figure it out. And is that kind of the plan here? Is like, let's try everything, see what he can handle. Because obviously if they were trying to win an NBA game tomorrow, you shrink his role down tremendously, and he'd have a lot better players around him, with all due respect to all the guys he's playing with in Summer League, but you'd have actual NBA players. Is that kind of like, how much of this is exploratory versus, testing a hypothesis, if you will, and that's a different enough options for the question?
I think it's testing a hypothesis. I think it is baseline testing to see where he's at right now in those areas. But you're right. You're probably not going to see him do too much of that as a rookie unless he, passes that test with flying colors. I think it's probably more of a long-term thing. But I think it actually says a lot about the team that the Wizards hope to build in the big picture. GM Will Dawkins said this on draft night. I thought it was a really interesting way to put it, that they want to be random within a system. And what he meant by that is they want to create an offense that is your 5-out offense, which NBA fans have probably heard of, where you have 5 shooters on the floor. So even the 4 and the 5 are on the 3-point line, and you just don't know where the attack is going to come from. But what the Wizards want to do is take that to the next step and have 5 guys who can beat you off the dribble. So you're going to see some experimenting with not just Alex Sarr, but a lot of players on their roster in the Summer League. And one example is anytime that the other team misses a shot, basically whoever gets the defensive rebound is going to have the green light to take the ball up the floor in transition. So prepare your eyes for that, because Alex Sarr is 7 feet tall, and he might be running the team in the fast break.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Again, that is the absolute beauty of Summer League. You see some wild stuff, and not saying this is going to happen to Sarr, but you're gonna see this over the course of many of the games that you'll be at. You get to see some guys fail spectacularly, and it's really fun. Just like, hey, big man, okay, we know you gave you the green light, but we're gonna rein you back in. I don't think Sarr's going to have that problem at all, but you will see some guys that maybe perhaps belong as more traditional post players on other teams, maybe with the Wizards down the roster, that get a little crazy in the open court, which is part of the fun of Summer League. Chase Hughes with us from Las Vegas. All right, Bub Carrington. Obviously, this is a guy that's going to be in the role he's going to be in during the regular season to an extent, just, more minutes here. We would imagine he's going to be handling the ball. We'll see what the shot looks like. What do you expect to see from Bub Carrington? Like, what do you expect to see that you feel confident about, and what's the thing that you're really wondering that's the unanswered question for Bub Carrington?
I think it's going to be a mix of him playing the 1 and the 2. And my question that's unanswered is, how much is he going to play at the 1? Because when they drafted him and they had 3 first-round picks, I thought, wow, they're going to have a fun Summer League team, and Bub Carrington's probably going to be the point guard running the offense. But then I saw the roster they put together, and they've got 9 of their 15 players with NBA experience, and that includes some point guards. Most notably Jared Butler, who last year was on a 2-way contract and played his way toward the end of the season into an actual NBA deal. So I think he's probably going to be their primary point guard. But we'll see Bub Carrington on the ball because he's really good at creating his own shot off the dribble. And another question I'll have as I watch him and see how he can answer it is his best skill is creating space off the dribble. He was one of the best players in college basketball last year. It's shooting off the bounce. He also did the same thing at the NBA draft combine. He put up really good numbers in shooting drills. But there's always an adjustment for young players in the NBA who have to create their own shot, because there's a difference between being open in college and being open in the NBA. And one of the adjustments they have to realize is just what constitutes an open shot. Because in college, you might be wide open and you think that's an open shot, but in the NBA, it might be a split second of daylight that you have to capitalize on. So can he get separation at this stage in a very athletic league that is the NBA Summer League? And where's he at right now? Because he's only 18 years old. Even if he does not get separation with guys right now, he's so advanced in that area. He's 6'4" without shoes, which is really a really good size for his skill set and his position. I think he'll be fine long term, but I want to know, where's he at right now in that regard?
Yeah, that's a great point too. Summer League is super athletic because that's like a lot of these guys. That's the thing that gets their ticket to Summer League is they're freakish athletes, and so in some ways it's more athletic than the actual league itself, where you have veterans who maybe lost a half a step or a half inch of bounce here or there. Just a bunch of young guys running around, and so that's a great point. Good test, even if those young guys may not have the know-how of a savvy veteran. Keyshawn George, the third and final of the first round picks, of course. Chase, what do we expect? And really for all of these guys. This will play a big part in the answer about what we expect from George. Like, what's the minutes distribution here, and how long into the summer do we expect to see them?
I think they're going to play plenty of minutes in the games that they do play. I can't promise that the first-round picks are going to play all 5 games, because as we've seen in the past, things kind of trail off towards the end. And, if you see what you want to see out of Alex Sarr or Keyshawn George or Bub Carrington in 3 games, you might not feel like you need to push it over the last 2. But for Keyshawn George, the first thing that'll stand out is his three-point shooting. He was a 40% three-point shooter last year at Miami. Really good off the catch. So I'm going to be interested to see, how can he make teams pay for overloading on Bub Carrington and Alex Sarr, who are very dynamic offensive players who can also pass. Like, they're probably going to be able to find him on the perimeter. And then also defensively, they're going to go up against Zachary Reese-Shea, the number 1 overall pick tonight, 9:30 p.m. Eastern on Monumental Sportsnet, by the way.
Hey, well done.
There you go. And Keyshawn George is about the same size as Zachary Reese-Shea. So I'd expect that he's going to guard the number 1 pick at least a little bit tonight. And I think that'll be a great test for him defensively, because he was known for his shooting in college, but GM Will Dawkins has really praised his potential on the defensive end a lot over the last few weeks.
So there's a ton of interesting names on like almost the entire rosters, like guys that not just I have heard of and that you, of course, know someone who covers this every day, but like anyone who's a Wizards fan knows, like, because they've been around the team, they've played on the team. It's one of the most NBA-laden summer league rosters I think I've ever seen. And so there's a couple more guys I want to hit on real quick, starting with Johnny Davis, because it's not often that going into year 3, a former first rounder is playing in the summer league. But like, is this, not to be dramatic about it, but just practically speaking, like, is Johnny Davis playing for his job, for his roster spot? Like, how like deep in the pecking order with the turnover, and obviously this is not the regime that drafted him, is Johnny Davis at this point in his Wizards tenure?
Well, on one hand, they did pick up his contract option for next year last October. So, they did make that decision. They did give him that sort of stamp of approval, but it's a big test for him for sure. I mean, he's been through 2 summer leagues before. You don't often see players go to a 3rd summer league. So clearly there's still a wait and see mentality from the front office. And they just drafted a guy who's a combo guard in Bub Carrington, who, essentially does a lot of the same things, at least on the offensive end. So I think the path for Johnny Davis to establishing himself in the NBA remains the same, and that is on the defensive end. Bub Carrington, Jordan Poole, the guards that they have at that spot are more known for their offense, and Johnny Davis is more known for his defense. And they want him to just play scrappy, ball-stopping defense on the perimeter. And if he can do that, then I think he has a chance to stick around. But, we've seen him in the Summer League have some mixed results. So certainly it'd be great for him if he could have a better performance.
No doubt. Just some other names to name them real quick. Patrick Baldwin Jr., Jules Bernard, Jared Butler, who you mentioned, Justin Champagnie, Eugene Omarui. So like ton of names that Wizards fans will know that especially played towards the end of last season as the injuries stacked up. But the last guy I'll ask you about real quick is Chase Hughes is with us. And by the way, they have a special tonight. It's Chase, it's Wes Hall and company out from Las Vegas ahead of the Summer League game at 6 o'clock on Monumental. And then the game, like Chase said, is at 9:30. But Tristan Vukcevic, the second-round pick from last year, showed some really nice flashes when he came over late in the season. What do we expect to see from him? And, like, is this a guy that we think is going to be in the rotation in 2024-25 for the Wizards?
Well, he was pretty solid last year in 10 games with the Wizards, and of course, was also pretty good in the Summer League a year ago. So now it's just like, what is the growth year over year? And their head coach, Cody Toppert, said that he's going to be focused on the defensive end when it comes to evaluating Tristan Vukcevic because he's gotten stronger, he's gained some muscle, and they want to see him play more physical defense. I'll be interested to see, does he share the floor with Alex Sarr? They're both about the same size. They can both shoot from the outside. So I could see them being playable together. But sometimes with big men, teams like to stagger things where they'll have a rotation where one guy's on the court as the starter and then the other guy just replaces him as the bench guy. So I think it'll be interesting to see Tristan Vukcevic's growth and also within the context of a lot of depth at his position now. Vukcevic played 10 games in the NBA last year. And then they drafted Alex Sarr, second overall. And then they signed Jonas Valanciunas, who is another 6'11", 7-foot center. And they still have Rashawn Holmes and Marvin Bagley III. So it's kind of crowded at that position. I think he could play some of the 4 and the 5. And, of course, he's young, so that's going to help his cause as the Wizards are trying to rebuild. But it would certainly, I think, go a long way for him to have a strong summer league showing going into training camp in the fall.
Yeah. The other thing to remember, we won't do the trade speculation here, but this is the time of year when the entire NBA is in one place. And so we've gotten through this first wave of free agency. Everyone's on their cell phones now, but like things happen at Summer League because all these GMs are all of a sudden together. And so it does feel like at a couple of positions, there maybe is another move to be made for the Wizards because they have some positional glut. So I think that's a good point too. And we'll see if this roster, NBA roster, is the same for the Wizards on the back end of Summer League as it is going in. It's just the nature of this time of year. Chase Hughes, West Hall and Company, talking about all of this at 6 o'clock. And then the game tonight, 9:30, as they get started for Summer League on Monumental Sports Network. Chase, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
Coming up at 6 p.m., Clinton Yates joins us for his Friday visit. Yates will be with us from Dallas. He's on Around the Horn today, but he's in Dallas. I was sitting in Kalishaw's seat, I do believe, for Around the Horn, but he's down there because Major League Baseball's All-Star Game is in Dallas next week. All-Star festivities all weekend long. Clinton, obviously a big part of ESPN's baseball coverage, so he'll join us coming up at 6 p.m. Right now, though, our off-season NFL coverage continues, and it's presented by T-Mobile. Switch to T-Mobile, and you can get tons of benefits and still save on every plan versus AT&T and Verizon. Use their savings calculator to find out how at T-Mobile.com/switch. That coverage comes in the form of Take Command, where Logan and I continued our All-NFC East series. For the full offense, you got to go back in our podcast and check out that. For the full defense, you obviously have to check out the podcast, but we'll break you off a little preview here on a Friday with the front seven, because it was the most fun debate, I think, of the entire division, specifically on the D-line, which is the most talented group in the entire division. Every single team has players who want a word in terms of, hey, I think I'm one of the best in the NFC East. So it was really fun to dive into, and thus we did. Here you go, a little Take Command on a Friday here on The Hoffman Show.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It's Take Command. I'm Craig Hoffman. That is Logan Paulsen, and we are doing part 2 of our All-NFC East series today, Logan. So we'll create a defense made up of only NFC East players and see who's the best of the best in the division. We did it for the offense earlier this week. Now time for the defense's turn. You ready to go?
Yeah,
Anything you
I was excited to do some defensive stuff. I think this one will be a lot of fun.
I do too, although it's kind of hard. Are we doing a base defense? Are we doing a nickel? Like, what are we doing? How many Joe Witt Jr.'s got 17 starters. How are we supposed to do 11?
I just want the best football players on the field. So if you want to do 3-4, we can do a 3-4. If you want to do, I think we should start in base because that's what most people do, and we'll draft a nickel also. You know what I'm saying? Like, do your base defense and then pick your best nickel player.
Okay, that works for me. Even if we want to just do like nickel as the base, but we'll try to shout out 3 linebackers. The more, the merrier. Yeah. Less people are mad at us later because we didn't pick their favorite guy, which is really what we're about here: is avoiding anger on the internet. How's that going, Craig? Fantastic.
Probably not great, I would think.
No, definitely never. All right, so let's start off with the D-line up front, and there are just an unbelievable amount of good players at every spot on the D-line in this division. So if we need 2 edge players and then 2 inside guys, whether we want to split 3 techniques, 1 techniques, whatever, obviously some of these guys are playing, like Dexter Lawrence is playing nose, but we're going to do a 4-3 here. And he's fully capable of playing a 1 or a 3. He's that good.
Sure.
Let's start off with the edge guys, though. Michael Parsons seems like a no-brainer. Yeah. And then I feel like there's a bunch of guys that we could argue about that second spot for.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, this is maybe just kind of a thought experiment. Like, I know we're going base 4 down here, but because of the talent on the interior here, this is a group that I might say, hey, we'd be better going 3-4 because then we get more of these kind of high caliber football players on the interior. But again, we're going to start with base defense, and we'll talk about that when we get to the defensive linemen. But I think it's Michael Parsons emphatically. You know, he's one of the best maybe defensive players in the NFL, maybe defensive players of the last decade, which is saying a lot. Like, he's a very dynamic, impactful football player. You know, going back and watching Dallas film, just the way they were able to use him, line him up in different spots, kind of maximize his ability. Like, he's a game-changing piece, much like, you know, Myles Garrett or, you know, Nick Bosa. And I kind of think it's probably between him and Myles Garrett for the best pass rusher in the league. Very, very physically gifted, strong, fast, can bend the edge, and has the flexibility to line up in different spots. So I think, yeah, he's probably the cornerstone of that defensive front on the edge. And then I think it becomes a little bit more interesting. Obviously, you got Brian Burns up in New York, who I think he's a good player. I personally think he's a little bit of a one-trick pony. I don't think he's this, you know, I think because LA wanted to trade 2 first-round picks for him a couple of years ago, his value and perception in the media became pretty verbose, you know, in terms of spectacular. I'm not sure he's on that level, but I was just thinking through it. I'm not sure there's another rusher now that Hassan Reddick's out of the league, that you say this guy has to be the guy. Maybe you say it's Bryce Huff. Maybe you say it's Josh Sweat. But I don't really have a strong take in terms of like there doesn't seem to be a definitive two. Also, Lawrence in Dallas is a pretty good football player, and I know he's been a little bit banged up, but like when he's at his best, I think he might have the mantle for the second best defensive end in the division.
Yeah, if it's like 2 years ago, it's a no-brainer. It's DeMarcus Lawrence. I think, and like, you know, if it's 2 years ago, you have still guys like Brandon Graham and some of the Eagles guys that are in different places in their careers as well. But Lawrence was, I think, probably the second best guy behind Parsons after Parsons emerged and overtook Lawrence in Dallas. I mean, Kayvon Thibodeau, if he could play the Commanders every week, he would certainly be up there with the way he's played against Washington. But I think you said all the right names. I don't think Washington has a guy that breaks that list. If you had to pick one Washington player that you think could burst onto the scene, like is Dorrance Armstrong good enough to challenge now with more playing time, not stuck behind Lawrence and Parsons? Is there one of these young guys? Like, do you think KJ Henry could explode? I guess as a young guy, I mean, they didn't spend a high pick on a pass rusher, so it's kind of hard there. But is there any young player or player that's going to get more opportunity? You know, like a Bryce Huff, for instance, in Philly, that you think is a great candidate to unseat Lawrence if we still think he's actually, when healthy, the second best guy in the division at edge?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, I think that this question would be more easily answered if we kind of saw a more fleshed out version of the defense. I think one of the things about Lawrence's use pattern in Dallas is that they were able to line him up kind of all over the front. And do they still do that here? Do they kind of still seek matchups for him in the same way? He's obviously pretty talented. I don't know if I think he could be a 10 sack a year guy for this team, and because he's going to be elevated by scheme. Another guy, just from like a sack standpoint, is Frankie Louvu. That guy's an excellent pass rusher. So, and I know he's not a defensive end per se, but I think he could make some waves for the Commanders in terms of, you know, being like an 8 to 11 sack guy with a bunch of pressures. Like his film from Carolina is pretty special rushing the passer just from a physicality standpoint. But I'd have to say, Dorrance Armstrong, excuse me, I said Lawrence earlier. Dorrance Armstrong is the guy that I think is probably going to burst onto the scene. And then I do think it's a really compelling group for Washington because the guys they have in the room are pretty freaky. You know, like Andre Jones is like tall, long. He's got all the things you want. It's just about, does it kind of develop? Does he have a role? Does he make the team? But KJ Henry, you mentioned also, like same type of thing. They have a type at rusher. They have tall, long, traitsy guys. And the funny thing about tall, long, traitsy guys is that they can kind of surprise you, given the right situation, given the right kind of coaching speak towards you. So, but I think Armstrong is the guy of the group here. And again, I would kind of put an asterisk near Frankie Louvu from a pass rush pressure standpoint. But again, he's not listed, and he's probably not going to play defensive end.
That's why we need 18 starters. If we do pass rusher deluxe, Louvu kind of gets the call there. So I would say Parsons, and then
I would probably go Bryce Huff. If I'm drafting a guy, and again, we got to be smart with our interior players here, but you know, his ability to affect the passer over the last couple seasons, and I understand it's a small sample size, I understand it's in a very specific role, like that pass rush win weight is special, and I'm going to bet on that, I think. And I think that's why Philadelphia spent all that money and bet on him. Like, I want people that can rush the passer. We're going to make good decisions on the interior. We're going to make good decisions at linebacker. But, you know, we've got to affect the most important position in football, and that is the quarterback. So let's get guys that can get after him and put him under pressure.
All right, so then we have the interior D-line. We have, obviously, two guys here with Allen and Payne. Dexter Lawrence is phenomenal. Yeah. You've got Jalen Carter in Philadelphia. Like, there's dudes all over the place. Dallas a little lacking in this department, even though they have the best on the edge. But there are certainly waves of interior players that the NFC East has to offer. Who do we think are ultimately the best two?
That's again, like it's kind of your flavor, you know, because you didn't even mention Jordan Davis as a guy. You know, he's had flashes over the course of the last.
I just think he's too like. He's great at what he does, but I feel like if I'm building a first team all defense here, like he's too limited.
Well, I think that's the thing though. When you look back at his film from last season, he had I want to say it was probably not the first 4 games, but after the first game that there was a 4-game sequence. So week 2 to 5 basically, where he had the highest pass rush win rate on the team. And so I think people sleep on his ability to affect, especially kind of smaller offensive linemen, turn shoulders, and get to the quarterback. And you hear Jason Kelsey talk about blocking him in practice and how he presents problems for him, and that guy might be going to the Hall of Fame at center. So I do think he needs to be in the conversation. I agree with you that he's, there's a reason that we're talking about 4 games as opposed to the full 17-game season. But I do think he needs to be in the conversation, and I think, depending on how that new Vic Fangio defense speaks to Carter, speaks to Jordan Davis, like we could be talking about them in a much different light at the end of the season. But I think to me, the emphatic one, much like Micah Parsons, is Dexter Lawrence for me. And then it's kind of your flavor. I think John has shown a pretty high level ability to rush the passer as a 3 technique. I kind of think Payne has more athletic upside, and the idea of getting those 2 big athletic bodies on the interior, Dexter Lawrence and Deron Payne, is pretty appealing to me. I really think that would be a kind of a devastating combination, coupled with Micah Parsons, coupled with Huff. I think that's a pretty formidable front. I don't know is there somebody that you feel deserves a shout out there? I don't know.
No, I think those are the right names. I mean, I feel like as Jalen Carter gets better, he's going to probably emerge as the right answer, as much as I would love to pump up the Washington duo.
Yeah.
And from an achievement standpoint, like their resumes obviously are better at this point because Carter's just isn't very long. But I think those are the right guys that we've mentioned here. I'm curious, like if you had to, it sounds like you actually lean Payne, especially if you're pairing him with Lawrence, which I think is extra interesting because I feel like they're more similar. Part of what their similarity is that they're freakish athletes that can do a bunch of stuff. And so that's why you maybe do that. But between Allen and Payne, do we feel like Deron has passed John as the better player at this point in their careers?
It's tough. It's really tough. I think last year was a tough year for John. I think we talked about how he was kind of dealing with the plantar fasciitis.
He was not right. Like if that's who John Allen is, then it's actually not that hard of a question.
Right.
I think the hard part to suss out is John Allen what he was last year now? Is he just his age gotten him, which is crazy because now I'm talking about guys that I covered their draft, like all of a sudden being the old guys in the league. And I'm like, what happened to me?
Yeah.
But for John, is he just getting near 30 and this is who he is now? Or did he have a perfectly explainable down year because he got hurt in training camp in his foot and he couldn't push off and explode and ground himself and do all the things that start with your foot the entire season? Not to mention the bad coaching, not to mention not having anybody outside of him on the edge that was dangerous, especially after they traded Chase and Montez. But even when Chase was there, like he was freelancing all over the place. We talked about it a ton last year. So John wasn't set up for success by his own body, nor by scheme, nor by teammates last year. And I certainly am not going to write off John Allen because he's done too much and is too good and is too competitive. And I think is too excited about this new coaching staff to undersell him. But I've thought Deron Payne was exceptional for years now. I've been like, these guys are closer than people want to give it credit for. John is just more outspoken, more the leader, more everything. So he's a little more out front. And I think people don't understand how good Payne is. So that's like, it's not like they're 1A, 1B, obviously in Washington for sure. And maybe they're 2A, 2B or 3A, 3B, however you want to put it in the division. Right. So they're real close. But I'm just curious from your perspective, because I feel like you also, with your like intimate level of knowledge and the amount of film you watch, you maybe appreciate some of the little stuff John does that is not as splashy as the stuff that Deron puts on tape that makes the rest of us go like, oh, wow, look at that amazing play. Look at that 3-play sequence against Denver that Deron Payne did. And just John has a steadiness to him that maybe actually shifts it back in his direction.
Yeah, I think, when you watch John, one of the things that comes out is like he's much more technical. He has a better feel as a pass rusher. He's got a little bit more savvy to his game. I think the thing with Deron is that, and probably one of the reasons why I would select him is I think you're just betting on the horsepower, like putting this bigger body it's a really explosive, twitched up athlete. Again, the polish as a rusher isn't there. But I think like when you look at, Miami under Vic Fangio last year, like they were able to do a lot with Wilkins because of he just can run well. He can move well. They'd create picks and movements, and the idea of getting 2 kind of bowling ball people in there that you can make a pick for and having the foot speed with Deron to kind of run the hoop, a tight hoop, and put those guys under pressure is very appealing to me. So I'm thinking more from a schematic standpoint. But if you just want a guy to say, hey, go out and win them one-on-one, like I'm picking John, as a pass rusher. And I think that's kind of, I'm maybe thinking about it a little bit more globally, just the pieces, the body types, the size, especially when you've got kind of an undersized guy on the edge in Huff. I think you want to kind of go bigger body. Like Micah Parsons is not the biggest guy in the world, but he plays with great strength. And so you got to kind of have other pieces there that would compensate for that. And one thing about John, he's a little bit lighter as a defensive tackle. I think he's like 195 pounds, 290 pounds, excuse me. But he has a hard time anchoring versus doubles. He has a hard time doing some of that really big body physical stuff. Now, there's technical things he does to get around it, but I would just, again, because of the other selections we've made, I'd probably kind of want to go a little bit bigger on the interior.
Makes sense to me. All right, so our All-NFC East defensive line is Micah Parsons, Deron Payne, Dexter Lawrence. Are we going? Hold on, are we going Payne or are we going Carter?
This is I think that this is where we probably should run we didn't talk about this. We should probably run a 3-4, honestly, because then Micah Parsons is a stand-up edge, Huff is a stand-up edge, and then you get these monsters in between.
Well, then you get Lawrence playing nose, Carter playing one, and then Deron playing the other.
Yeah, that's brutal. I mean, think about that, man. Think about how dominant that group would be, and it becomes more dominant because you're getting better interior players. And
well, then your off-ball linebackers, which we'll get to in a second, like they got room to run around.
Yes,
and with the dudes that we're gonna have running around, oh my God.
Yeah, 100%. So that's where I'd say, because of the strength of this division seems to reside on the interior defensive line, let's run a 3-4, and then we can get in a sub when we need to.
Yeah. Okay, so if that's the case and all of a sudden that stand-up edge is truly just like a stand-up edge off ball, or an on-ball, if you will, linebacker, would you then make Luvu over Huff, or would you keep Huff there?
That's a great question. Man, that's tough.
Because we'll compare Luvu to Wagner and Okereke and McFadden and all these dudes in a second as a pure linebacker while adding in his pass rush. But if we're going to do the 3-4 thing...
Yeah, I think, man, he's just I'm going to talk very glowingly about him here, because like when you watch Luvu's film, he is a football player's football player. He's physical, he's smart, he's instinctive, he's relentless. So I want that dude on the field. And I think when we get to linebackers here and we talk about who we're going to pick, like that'll become very, very obvious for me. But I guess flip a coin is how I'm going to say about that, because I think Huff does a decent job of that, and I think he could survive at that, and he's such a special pass rusher. Like I want that on the field, because he's a better pass rusher than Luvu, but I think Luvu, quote unquote, is a better football player, and so it kind of depends on the direction you want to go. And again, we talked about our defensive philosophy in terms of drafting this team, and I would say like I want the pass rusher right this second, but there are ideas that you have in your head where you're like, shoot, man, maybe there's a package where he's the edge guy like you're talking about, and we have, Okereke and Wagner on the field at the same time, and that seems like a pretty dynamic group of guys there. So I'm going to stick with Huff for now, just because that he's got a fastball and it's very fast and it's very effective. But I love that question and I love that thought experiment, because he does a good job of that for sure.
Okay, so let's get to the off-ball linebackers, and I feel like it actually just comes down to the 4 that are in Washington and New York. With all due respect to Dallas, with all due respect to Philadelphia, some of the guys there's some solid football players, but none of them are as good as Bobby Wagner, gold jacket pending. But also, even last year, your NFL leader in tackles. Frankie Luvu, who you just talked about, is incredibly special as a pass rusher, but also is a very, 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 very good off-ball linebacker.
Yeah. And he's a great blitzer from that off-ball position, which is very unique too. Yeah.
And then Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden in New York, both excellent. McFadden, young guy, just emerged as a potential stud. Okereke has been one of the best middle linebackers in football for a couple of years now. Who do you take here? It's the rookies versus the vets, not necessarily the rookies, but like the young guys versus the vets in some cases.
Again, if we're just going upside, and this is where like linebacker becomes really important and really interesting, and it's the same thing with the defensive line. Like once you add a little veteran experience to the mix, how does it affect the room? I think if Luvu is as smart as he seems to be on film, if Okereke is as smart as he seems to be on film, like I would probably go that direction, because those guys are, or they have been the last year, like they're special athletes, and they are moving the direction the position is going. Luvu's not as great a coverage player, but Okereke can cover a tight end. He can do some stuff in the slot for you. He can fit a run. He's got great length. He's a smart kid, and I think like that's the way you want to go. I want those guys on the field, and that's not a knock on Wagner, because again, Wagner's going to the Hall of Fame, but I do think those guys, just from an athletic perspective, if they're smart enough to kind of handle it and call it, you want those guys on the field. But we've seen, covering Washington, covering the league for a long time, that's not always the case. Sometimes you need that field general. And if you want a field general, it's funny, I think the two guys we aren't talking about, Wagner, and what's the guy's name from New York?
Mike McFadden.
Mike McFadden are both kind of that field general type guy. And so I'd probably, if you need a field general, I'd probably go Okereke and Wagner, because I think Okereke is probably the best linebacker in the division, just full package. Again, I love Luvu. But if you need a guy to kind of direct people, like, I don't know how you could look past the best general, of Wagner. So if we're going just athletes and physicality, I'm probably going Luvu and Okereke. But if we need that field general on there, I'm probably going Bobby Wagner, which is a good sign for the Commanders, because both their linebackers are in the talk for kind of that second linebacker of the division, depending on what you're looking for there.
Yeah. Does it change if we're in that 4-3 look versus the 3-4? Like if you got two guys in the middle there that are your only two, or if we're playing nickel, and that's it's a 4-2-5, if you will, traditional nickel or buffalo nickel, whatever. Does it change which guy you want, or is it still kind of come down to, because it's physicality and traits versus mental acuity and experience? Is it the same conversation through and through?
I think the way I look at like Luvu, for example, he does so much really good stuff at the line of scrimmage, near the line of scrimmage as a pass rusher, And so if we're getting in a nickel, like it's a coverage down, we probably shift a little bit in terms of the point of emphasis, And so I don't think that's where he's at his best, but I can't get past how good he is at the other stuff. So as much as I think we should probably go, Okereke and maybe the guy in New York, McFadden, is that his name?
Yeah.
McFadden. If we went that direction, because I think they're both better coverage linebackers, right? But if you want somebody just to be a football player's football player, I think Luvu might be the best. Let me say this. He might be the best football player in the division. Like, you know what I mean? Just in terms of how he takes on blocks, how he tackles, how he pass rushes. And so I want that guy on the team. So even though like he might be a little bit of let me just say this, coverage might not be his strength. The other stuff is pretty special.
All right, that from Take Command. If you want our coverage, our All-NFC East DBs, or you want the offense, check out the Take Command podcast. The offense was earlier in the week. Defense, obviously, on this pod, which you can get in your podcast app right now. It includes defense, or the DBs as well. And then, actually, Anthony, we closed out the podcast with a couple of mailbag questions, including one from our guy, Big Doug, the Big Douglas Show. He asked if Logan misses his hair. It's specifically his long hair, because Logan still has hair.
Yeah.
But Logan had the ginger flow back in the day.
Yeah. Did he ever let it grow into like a mullet?
I don't think he ever...
Or is his hair not, curly enough to...
Yeah, I don't think it really mullets.
Have that pattern.
Like, it just was a flow.
Yeah, it just flew.
It was just long.
Like Sunshine. Is he from Cali?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Sort of, kind of.
It was kind of an emotional answer that he gave. It's definitely worth your time this weekend as you're rolling around. Check out the Take Command podcast. Also, always, if you miss any part of this show, check out the Hoffman Show podcast, wherever you get yours. Joe Theismann earlier this week, all our USA basketball coverage of Ben Golliver and Tim Bontemps, my takes, Anthony's takes / funny jokes. It's all in there. The entire show, the whole kit and caboodle. It's in there. So just search the Hoffman Show wherever you get your pods. All right, we get back here on the Hoffman Show. Speaking of podcasts, the host of ESPN Daily, our good friend Clinton Yates joins us for his Friday visit. We have another math lesson in the 6 o'clock hour, and of course our weekend preview brought to you by
nobody, Craig.
Nobody, but we're gonna do it anyway. It's our next hour, our final hour of the week on the Team 980. Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And joining us now, as he does most every Friday, is Clinton Yates, our buddy, our pal, host of ESPN Daily. He's in Dallas, where the Major League Baseball All-Star festivities will kick off and all happen this week. We call it All-Star Weekend, but it happens in the middle of the week. It's a wacky bit, Clinton.
Yeah, it is kind of a wacky bit. That's a whole other story. I kind of think the All-Star game should probably be on the 4th of July every year, but whatever. I just left the Dallas Morning News, the newspaper of record down here. I was doing the TV show, sitting in Tim Kalishaw's chair, but now I'm about to go back to the hotel and head to the ballpark.
Love that. Love that. There is, of course, the weekend activities with the Futures game and all the other stuff that does happen. But then the big leaguers get there next week, including from the Washington Nationals, C.J. Abrams. Obviously, the big story, as we talked about last week, James Wood coming up this week for the Nats. But Abrams, kind of that 1B story right now, the fact that he has made his first All-Star team as the Nats representative. What do you think this means for him and for the Nats that he is All-Star caliber at this early stage, just over a year, basically, after he got here?
You know what I think? I think there's a couple things. Number one is that you always want somebody that, you get in that kind of way to actually bear some fruit. So that's number one. But number two, and this is coming from a far more, I think, kind of nuanced standpoint, I think it's really important that the Nats get a position player in the All-Star mix. I know that last year JoJo was there, and it was kind of different because he was a young guy that had turned his career around on the mound. But there's something about having a position player that I think, particularly for a franchise that's had a lot of trouble drafting and developing guys that actually turned out to be high caliber players on the field, on the dirt. That to me is pretty important. I mean, never mind how much kids in DC can look at a kid like CJ and say, hey, that kid looks like somebody I know. I might want to play too. That's one element. But the general idea of we're not just specializing in random arms every once in a while that pop up and have a good season, I think that's a good thing for the Nats.
No, I think it's great. And I think, also Abrams is seemingly ahead of schedule and maybe even ahead in some departments, specifically power, of where people ever thought he would be. We were talking to our colleague here, Ryan Clary, earlier in the week about Abrams just after this news. And he's like, I didn't know if, in terms of home runs, like 14 in a season, like how many times he's going to hit that in his career. And this is where he is going into the All-Star break, pending any more dingers this weekend. He had 18 last year with the Nats in that full season that he played. So really 2 years since he got here. But what have you seen from him as an actual baseball player? Nevertheless, the accolades that we're talking about here.
Well, here's how I'll address this: is that this is the problem with scouting department on projections in ways unmotivates it. It makes teams want to say, listen, if we don't think you're going to project well, we're not even necessarily going to take the chance, and we're not even going to put you in a position to prove anybody wrong. That's the only really good thing about playing on what I'll just say, frankly, is a relatively bad team, is that when their options aren't there, perhaps guys can, God forbid, Gregory, just get better. And that's something that we don't see as much developmentally now in the game because all these things, all of these readouts that we have on where guys are going to get to or what we think they're capable of based on this, that, and the third. And it's like sometimes if you let a guy play and figure it out and get to who they are and they've got big league talent, you might just get an all-star. And I think that's the case of what we're looking at here with CJ.
Yeah, and hopefully there's a couple others coming up that will follow in his footsteps. Clint Yates with us from Dallas ahead of Major League Baseball All-Star Weekend and ultimately week. The story in baseball, of course, is Paul Skeens, the number one pick last year with the Pirates, who has come up and looked unbelievable. Before we get to the fact that he's been named the All-Star starter, I'm sure this is what you guys talked about in part on Around the Horn today. The decision to pull him 7 innings into a no-no last night. Where are you on team history versus team responsible management, as the sides are often called?
So this isn't the first time that's happened this season. In his second start of his career, it happened against the Cubs. He came out of a no-hitter. That was a little bit more understandable. On this side, with the All-Star break coming up, there is a school of thought that the conspiratorial people out there wanted to make sure that nothing happened because of the All-Star game. There's a lot of different competing factors here, but I think ultimately there's a larger discussion here about how I don't know that we're going to see a ton more one-man, 1-0 hit appearances for a long time. Like I just don't think that that's a thing that we're going to have a lot more of in the game pretty much for the rest of our lives unless something drastic changes. I mean, think about it, Craig. Guys don't go over 100 pitches. The way that the setup game now is almost the entirety of what the purpose of having a staff is. You got openers here. You got dudes that are specialists there. I just don't know that a 9-inning complete game no-hitter is something that we can realistically expect to see on a regular basis in Major League Baseball anymore. I really don't.
Is that a good, bad, or indifferent thing?
That's an excellent question because I personally am not a huge no-hitter guy. And very specifically in the cases of Paul Skeens, like if you've seen that guy throw, I don't need the no-no. This guy is nasty. All right, striking out guys in Omaha at Wake Forest, running buck 02 inside on dudes is one thing. It's another thing to get up to the big league and start mowing guys down because they can't figure out what pitch is coming out because your arm slot is so consistent and you've got so many different pitches you can throw. The pitching is what matters to me. The no-hitters, if you're not in the building, I don't particularly care. But I do understand, Craig, that a lot of people sort of enjoy that element of, maybe the kid's going to get there. When you take out the entire wonder of can the guy actually make it through, you are going to lose a certain percentage of fans that are watching on any given day. But I don't know that it's an overall large problem if suddenly no-hitters become or go the way of the dodo.
Yeah, when we talk about this kind of overall arm management, specifically with a young guy, obviously locally we all think of Strauss, and kind of in the end we go, it didn't really work out anyway. It just seems like you're robbed of some innings his rookie year, and maybe even, there's a lot of consternation about a chance at a title and shutting him down for the playoffs and that whole gambit.
Right.
So how much does that history influence your thinking, as well as like what are the other key data points you think about of the efficacy of this kind of strategy?
I don't even think you've got to get that far back into things like the Nats or Strauss. I mean, that is almost ancient history in the context of what we're talking about from an analysis standpoint regarding what pitchers are doing and not doing. I think that this is just an in-the-moment situation where they say, we want this kid for as long as possible. A no-no in July just isn't worth it, and that's fine by me. I mean, look, would I probably held him out there at least until the 8th? Yeah, but that's me, but I'm also not a big league manager. But Paul said it wasn't his decision. It was on the manager, and he said he didn't necessarily feel super tired. He just trusted, the manager said he just trusted his eyes and ears. I mean, look, I understand protecting your investments. I really do get it. But I think that where we are now, you take a risk on Paul Skeens in any place you don't have to, and you're opening yourself up to criticism that I think probably is unfair. However, in the case of this kid, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. I think the kid's going to have a great career either way.
Clint Yates with us, of course, host of ESPN Daily, is in Dallas for Major League Baseball All-Star, and he'll be providing coverage on all of ESPN's platforms over the next week. Skeens, not just the no-no in the news, he is your starter for the National League in the All-Star game. Clinton, he wasn't on their opening day roster. Like, what? How unprecedented is this? Is there any precedent for this? And then how is it so obvious that this is the correct thing to do?
It's happened 3 or 4 times in terms of the numbers he's putting up at this stage. But I'll say this. I will give the Pirates some credit here because service time manipulation is a huge problem, particularly with bad teams that don't know how to do it right. If you go up the road from where I'm from and where you live, Craig, to Baltimore, they've done it right. They brought up all their young players. They said, you're going to play because you're good enough. You could have argued that Skeens probably could have made this staff coming out of spring training, but they just kind of weren't going to do that because you just kind of don't do that. So while I do look at it as him not starting the season on the roster or on the 40-man, it's still effectively the same. That being said, when you haven't lost a game and you're blowing guys away left and right, and nobody seems to be able to touch you because your stuff is that good, and a former college pitcher star, a person we knew to some degree, this is about as good a case scenario as you could get for Major League Baseball in an All-Star game. The only other option being, I don't know, when Ohtani both started and led off the game in Colorado, which was incredible. I saw that with my own eyes. That was insane. But, yeah, this is what you want. Young, marketable stars. It helps that this guy's got a famous partner who people know of as well. But this is, to me, one of the better situations that we could have asked for coming out of this scenario. No doubt about it.
I did chuckle when the video went around last night of Livy Dunn on the red carpet of the ESPYs getting asked about Paul Skeens, her partner, being pulled in the 7th inning of a no-no, as if she was going to have some kind of incredible analysis of that situation.
Well, hold on. You don't know. She was in Omaha. She's seen him pitch since he was in college.
I know.
She's an athlete. She might know a little bit more about this than you do. But my point is, Gregory, this is the kind of thing we need in baseball. Yeah, influencer gymnasts discussing pitch counts is precisely what Major League Baseball cannot pay for in terms of marketing and general buzz. Pretty awesome.
Livy, teach me the biomechanics of elbows and such. Yeah, pitch counts. Give me the science. Let's go on the red carpet at the ESPYs. That's exactly what we need.
Just say it.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, which is kind of the funny part. And there's no kind about it. Anyway, that's Clinton Yates, everybody. ESPN Daily, it's daily. And you can catch them all over ESPN's platforms all weekend long from Dallas and into next week for Major League Baseball's All-Star Game. Clinton, thank you, sir. I will talk to you next Friday.
Have an excellent weekend, Gregory.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. All right. I saw an article. Actually, tell you what. Let's do this. Let's save that for 6:30. And let's talk quickly a weekend preview, which is brought to you by nobody. Still, alas, that's okay. We'll be good on that front. But we have this weekend is a weekend full of soccer. We have a tremendous sporting weekend Sunday with the Euros, and that is going to be a lot of fun between England and Spain. And then it caps off Sunday night with the Copa America final between Colombia and Argentina. So the Euros, England and Spain. England has never won the Euros on the men's side. Spain has gone through dominant stretches and is looking to regain their place atop European soccer. This is ironically a rematch of the final of the Women's World Cup last year, country versus country. Very funny today, by the way, at Wimbledon, which is, of course, in England. The Spaniard, Carlos Alcaraz, was addressing the crowd and said, it's going to be a very fun day on Sunday with the Euros. And the crowd started to he goes, I didn't say Spain was going to win. I said it's going to be fun because we're playing. So that's fun. By the way, we can preview Wimbledon final also. The Wimbledon final across the board. Also this week. But I think it's so funny this England team for the Euros because going to their respective tournaments, England and the USA were not very far apart. They were two sides that there was a lot of frustration with the coaches. I think the difference is Gareth Southgate, the coach of England, had been able to pull out a lot of different results. Which is great. Like, he had been to some semifinals, been to some quarterfinals, and he just kind of found a way to figure it out, but never exceed expectations. It's just the players that he had, the player pool was a lot better, and so they were getting farther in tournaments. But a lot of people in the English media, and certainly English fans who are notoriously patient and kind, they were frustrated because they don't score a lot of goals, and there was a lot of like underlying data that suggested that England team was maybe not performing up to their level. And even early on in this tournament, England was struggling to score. And it was kind of funny. I saw a tweet at one point that was like, only Gareth Southgate, the coach of England, could take Germany's leading scorer, or the leading scorer in the Bundesliga. Obviously, they're all English players, but the leading scorer in the German league, in Harry Kane, the top scorer in the English Premier League, or one of them in Bukayo Saka, and one of the top scorers in the Spanish league in Jude Bellingham of Real Madrid. And not produce any goals. But England has figured it out. They figured out how to survive and advance and move on. And now Southgate is on the edge of becoming a legend here. If he can pull this off and win the final, it would be a tremendous comeback story, because 4 years ago in the Euros, that you might remember was the tournament where England lost on penalties in one of the knockout stage rounds. And there was just an incredible wave of racism that followed, because three of the players who missed penalties for England were Bukayo Saka, Marcus Rashford, and I am, to be frank, forgetting who the third player was. But there was three black players that missed, and they received just an unbelievable amount of backlash. Much of it, like the language that was used, not to say like, hey, you suck, you cost us, but it was very racist. And there was a whole reckoning, and it was bad. But for England and for specifically some of those young players, and some of those kids were like 16, but like 18, 19 at the time, 20 years old, for them to still be young players, still be in their early to mid 20s and come back and perform like they have. Bellingham's been arguably the best player in the entire tournament, certainly has come up with some massive opportunities for England and scored some key goals, saved their butts in the knockout stage with that incredible bicycle kick. It's really a great story. And for Spain, like, this is a team that at one point about 12, 13 years ago at this point, they were like unbeatable. They went through a stretch where they were just on top of the world, and they were clicking on all cylinders, and obviously some of those players aged out, and they've kind of been reclaiming to try to find themselves. Their federation has been a mess, and some of the stuff that's happened with the women's team over there, despite them winning the World Cup, is crazy. So it has been a couple of years for Spanish soccer, both in that their federation is a mess, which many federations across the world are, and they've also won a lot, which just tells you about the soccer talent in that country. Meanwhile, Copa America, you have Argentina and Colombia, and you have a chance for Lionel Messi to go out on top. I mean, who knows? Maybe he's playing in this tournament again. But Angel Di Maria certainly is not. His long time, 20-year teammate. But it's a chance for an Argentinian group of elder statesmen, headlined obviously by Messi, to add another trophy to their case for a group that for a long time lacked trophies. Now, obviously, they won the World Cup. Messi finally got that, and now you're seeing him a chance to win this gigantic tournament in CONMEBOL, the South American region. Obviously, North American teams are playing in this one as well. The U.S. didn't get very far, we know, and so it should be a lot of fun. Colombia is fantastic. They look so promising about a decade ago, and James Rodriguez all of a sudden was this miracle wonder kid. He signed with Real Madrid. And now he's the elder statesman on that team, and they've just consistently pounded teams in this tournament. I mean, we think back to before the tournament, they played here against the U.S. in Landover at Commanders Field, and they beat them 5-0, and that was the beginning of the end for Greg Berhalter, and a sign of things to come for the U.S. side. But it was also a sign of things to come for Colombia, where they ultimately are able to just thrash opponent after opponent, survive a brutally tough semifinal against Uruguay. They're down a man for much of that match, the entire second half, and so should be a lot of fun on Sunday. Also this weekend, as I said, the Wimbledon finals are this weekend, Saturday and Sunday respectively, so should be a lot of fun. Great sporting weekend. Kind of also with the time differences from where all these things are, you can get up, watch some sports, do some stuff, come back, there'll be more sports on. It's an enormous WNBA weekend, the last weekend, every team getting their last games in before the Olympic break. And up next, we are going to talk about ESPN.com's rookie rankings. They've got Angel Reese as number 1 according to some of their advanced data. I have a bit of a bone to pick with some of the data that they pick, though. We will get to that and explain why the race is rigged. Yeah, I went there. It's rigged. Next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. If you missed any part of the show, you can check it out in the Hoffman Show podcast. Just search the Hoffman Show wherever you get yours. Right now, I saw an interesting article on ESPN.com yesterday, and it kind of fed into something we've been talking about on the show, which is some of the data and the interesting background about how the Rookie of the Year race is going in the WNBA. And I think it feeds into a much larger basketball argument about what data we use, how we use it, the way we, as fans, interpret the game, the way teams interpret the game, the way that front offices use certain data points. And it all goes back to a thesis that I've long had when it comes to analytics, which is the numbers are only as valuable as the people that have them. Now, to get kind of less theoretical and more to the point, and then we'll expand it back out, ESPN.com did their rookie rankings, and by the criteria that they are using, Angel Reese is currently the Rookie of the Year based off their power rankings, which if you want to make that argument, and this would be the data to ultimately do it, that is fine. They use three different statistics, advanced numbers, and I'll go into more of these in a second. Win shares, PER wins, and Raptor wins. So these are three advanced analytics, and Neil Payne is part of ESPN's analytics team, and he's the one that did this. So here's from the article. With so many shakeups, our updated rookie rankings reflect a much larger sample. As a refresher on our process, each 2024 rookie is rated based on how many wins each has added so far this season using a consensus of three different advanced value metrics. Basketball References win shares, estimated wins added from player efficiency rating, and wins generated via estimated Raptor. RAPTOR, which is a big acronym, a plus-minus style that accounts for both a player's individual production and her effect on her team's net rating during a game. The Raptor metric is a new addition to these rankings, and it's a big improvement because it includes a player's stats and the effect of those stats on the game. Raptor is one that I've actually not seen before, but it comes off of using your offensive and defensive differential when you're on and off the court and all these really good information. But the thing that I think is interesting about this data, which they then put all into a single metric of each estimate of wins created is then averaged into a single metric called consensus wins, which they can then use to rank every qualified rookie. Reese comes in at 2.9. Clark comes in at 1.6. Aaliyah Edwards from the Mystics is actually third on this list at 0.8. And they use different, rankings breakdowns in terms of scoring, true shooting, passing, rebounding, the percentile that they are in the NBA. And there's also a defense metric. But the problem in general, or I shouldn't say the problem, because it makes it seem like then analytics aren't worth anything, which they're worth a ton. But again, they're only worth as much as you can interpret them, right? They're only worth as much as the context they exist in. But the problem with analytics is that you can't put something into the formula that doesn't exist. And so, for instance, one of the things that Caitlin Clark's, stands on the internet will go off about is, her turnovers, they're caused when she hits players in the hands and they fumble out of bounds. And there are a decently high amount of those. But there's also just really good passes she makes that don't get finished. Does that mean that her value as a player, her potential impact on the game is any different? No. If she was playing with better teammates, which, by the way, is something that's baked into those of us that are paying attention and was expected this year, right? We knew she was going to a team that got the number one pick, that had the number one pick the year before. They're not a good basketball team. And I've talked on the show before about some of the schematic issues and the lack of a plan that they had, especially early in the season, where they played about half of their games before ever really getting to practice, and they played them in just absolutely dire circumstances where they did not seem to have an offense. And so she accumulated a lot of bad numbers in that period, and the turnovers go into the formulas, because whether, they are Clark's fault by subjective analysis, all of us watching being like, that one, yes, it's on Caitlin. No, that one's on Lexi Hull or Aaliyah Boston or Nalissa Smith or whoever. Some of them are Clark's fault. Some of them are the receiver's fault. They all go into the formula. And that's the point, is the analytics that even try to suss out these things and inform the wins and the PER and the win shares and all of these things are based off of what happens, not what could happen. And because of that, the other side of analytics, things that a lot of teams use, is they try to make their best guess. Internal analytics look very different than a lot of the stuff that we talk about on the outside, because they'll look at a player's value and be like, potential assists. Those types of things exist. Points off of assists. So like, are you assisting just layups or are you assisting 3-pointers? Okay, well, now we take that stat and we translate it over to potential points off assists. Well, based off of our tracking and what we think should happen there, that player should have made that shot or makes that shot at a certain percentage, and so we're going to add that to the formula. But when it comes to actual win shares, when it comes to these metrics that try to measure what actually happened during games, all we can do is go based off of what happened, which is why I think for something like this, for rookie rankings, okay, that's fine. If you want to say our rankings, the formulas we're using, spit out Angel Reese is 1, Caitlin Clark is 2, Aaliyah Edwards is 3. Okay. I'm not going to tell you that your numbers are wrong. What I would tell you is that if you have a rookie of the year vote, I hope you have more context. And I would say the same thing for like MVP in the NBA. This isn't specific to Caitlin and Angel. This is not specific to the W. This is across sports. It's, do you understand the analytics in the context that you're using them? And because both these players, frankly, play on not very good basketball teams, then their numbers, their advanced analytics, are not going to look as good as if you plugged either of them in on the New York Liberty, the Las Vegas Aces, or the Connecticut Sun. And so that context matters. And it's why I think when you look at the impact that Clark has on the game, and I also think by the end of this, frankly, it's going to be a no-brainer, because Clark is ascending at an astronomical rate. Like, she is putting up numbers over the last month that are pretty unprecedented in the league, period. Nevertheless, unprecedented for a rookie. So I do think the longer this goes, and we'll see how she comes back after the Olympic break, where I think Angel will continue to play really good ball at a steady rate and put up a bunch of double-doubles. And, we'll see, as I've said earlier in the week, like when we talked about this stuff, I hope her shooting percentages come up and her rebounding numbers come down a little bit, because the point of offense is to score, not to get offensive rebounds. Sure, it's great if you do miss, but last night she's 5 for 17, barely scraping by 10 and 10 in a loss to the Liberty to extend the double-double streak. And frankly, there's an embarrassing stat padding that happens the game before, where she extends the double-double streak, even though they should have just dribbled out the clock. And she was like begging for the ball and then kind of fell down and hit a free throw to extend it. So I think that overall, both players are playing really well. The data that was selected for this particular thing is reflective in part of the Sky being slightly better than the Fever. And I think some of the numbers, like PER, favors bigs over guards, because it's an efficiency stat. And so it tends to favor players that shoot close to the basket. The fact that it's remotely close is actually a compliment to Clark. And by the end of this, as much fun as it is to talk about now and talk about the strengths and weaknesses and some of the defensive numbers, I think Clark has gotten a lot better on that side of the floor. I think Reese is still obviously the better defender. But all of that stuff, I think by the end of the year, it's actually going to be fairly obvious, if it's not already. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And when we get back, we'll wrap up the show with the best thing from the show today, and real things real people said into real microphones. Oh, buddy, are we looking forward to the weekend? Wrapping up here on the Hoffman Show, Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. What a show it's been. If you missed any part of it, you can check it out. Just search the Hoffman Show in your favorite podcast app, and the entire show is on demand for you. All right, Anthony, we got the best thing from the show today. We've been doing this all week. We're going to continue to do it. What did you think the best thing from the show today was, sir?
I'm not going to lie. I think I liked your take on Joe Theismann.
Oh.
His thoughts about Jayden Daniels not playing.
So, yesterday Theismann was on, and that's all anyone was talking about today was what Theismann said on this little here radio show. Theismann said he didn't think Daniels should start in the preseason. I don't fully agree with that, and this was from earlier in the show when I explained that at length. I do think that getting a series, 2 series, 3 series in the preseason is worth it for a young quarterback to experience that, to go out there and get the adrenaline flowing, to understand what even preseason speed is like. It's not regular season speed, but it is faster than a joint practice. It is faster than your own practices. So there is a ton of value there, even if it's a small sample size, just so that when he gets out there for the first time and the bullets are flying, for real, that it's not new. That's my argument. That's the crux of it. If you want the full take on that, just search the Hoffman Show in the podcast feed, and it's right there. Because in 7 minutes, the show will be over. But if your commute might not be, you might have more driving to do. You might have more chores that you're doing around the house, and you're like, hey, I want to listen to some local sports talk, and I didn't hear the first hour of the show. Okay, well, it's on demand for you. Or check it out this weekend. But yeah, it was good. We took some calls on it, really good calls on both sides of the argument. And that's the thing, Anthony. I don't think that there's a concrete answer either way. I think I can make an argument for Jayden. I think you can make for Jayden starting in the preseason and playing in the preseason. I can make an argument for holding him out. But I also think that I mentioned this at the very end of the hour. The biggest factor here is just how sure are we that he's the starter? And I would say I'm pretty sure. But like, how do we feel about that as training camp goes on? Because if he's definitively the starter, then maybe you think about, well, we don't want to put tape out there of him during the preseason, et cetera, et cetera. If he's still competing with Mariota for the job, you might need that as an evaluation tool. And I think that's a part of that argument that we kind of skipped over until the very end, but is pretty important in the grand scheme of it all.
Yeah, and I just think also that's just the beauty of sports. Everybody's going to have or feel a way about, preseason. Some people think you need to go out there, play a half. Some people think you need to play a couple series. And I think, I'm going to trust the brain power of our Washington football team. And I think they know what they want, and they know what, they need to see. So I trust them.
Like you said, though, those joint practices are so important. So we will see what happens with those. Training camp, let's see. Today's the 12th. It starts on the 25th, I think they report. I think the 28th.
The rookies report next week.
It's crazy. We're almost through the doldrums, Anthony.
Uh-oh.
We're almost to training camp. And I'll be here for like 4 practices, and then I'm going to Paris. All right, it's time for real things.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
All right, Anthony, it's Friday. That means you get to drive real things. What do we got?
Yes, sir. So we got a couple of things. So I know you know about the game NCAA 24. Everybody's been talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy that's actually in the game, and he didn't fail to let us know that he's in the game.
All right, here we go. Let's go gun far. Sigma right.
That sounds like Uncle Eli.
F whirly bird, alert scarecrow. All right, use a little cadence here. All right, you ready?
Are you sure about this?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the best way to focus on football, all right? So get your eyes on the safety. Be vocal out there.
Yes, Coach. I mean, Uncle E.
It's better.
Green 18. Green 18. Omaha. Sut. All right, there he is. There he is. Now. Boom.
Touchdown! Now that's why you're in the game.
EA Sports. I'm in the game.
It's Texas quarterback Arch Manning.
You know, we could have just won 4 verts.
You could have just went 4 verts. At a quarterback's favorite thing to tell a coach.
Yes.
That's funny. That's good. Also, yet another Manning who's good at acting.
He is indeed.
They're good at quarterbacking. They're good at acting. Those Mannings. Good at stuff that makes you a whole lot of money. By the way, are you excited for Bill Belichick on the Manning cast this year?
I am.
I actually think that's going to be amazing.
Isn't he also doing something with Ryan Clark?
Oh, yeah. He's doing Inside the NFL. That's going to be unbelievable. Because Inside the NFL is like one of the best shows on television.
Mm-hmm.
And Belichick on there, where they like get deeper into the film and stuff. Oh, my God. That's going to be ridiculous.
Can't wait to see what he has to say about, Mahomes, the Chiefs, the Steelers.
Yeah, Belichick's
Colts.
an interesting cat, but you listen to that dude talk about football, you're like, I get it. I get why you are you. You're a genius.
Next up, Emma Hayes. Apparently her number finally got saved by one of her teammates.
Emma Hayes, the coach of the U.S. Women's National Team.
Okay.
So they're making the calls. I saw this clip. So this is from the Men in Blazers, the Women's Game podcast with Sam Ewis. And Jenna Niswanger, Gotham defender and member of the U.S. Women's National Team, is the guest. And Sam, the host, asked Jenna, the player, about getting the call that she made the Olympic roster.
So can you talk to us about what it was like to get that phone call that you had made the roster?
It was so exciting. I think once I saw the number, I didn't have the number saved, but I saw the Chicago, Illinois ID and I was like, oh my God, it's happening. I hope. Let's see what she says.
Wait, so was Emma just calling you from a house phone, from an office phone?
I think from her mobile phone that she had sent out weeks ago, but I never saved it. So I was like, well, if I get a random phone call, it's going to be Emma. So I'll just answer it no matter what today. And it was perfect timing because I was on the way home. Yeah, it was just so exciting, that phone call.
Oh my gosh, that is so, I know, it's the best phone call ever. Did you save Emma's number after that?
I didn't even think about it. I was so excited.
Oh my God. Okay, well, that's probably going to be your homework after this, is to go in your little phone and save her number.
Wow.
Yeah. Are you, if you get a call from a number, because we deal with this in our jobs, because we'll get a call from someone and be like, oh, we need to save that number so we can have them as a guest or whatever later. Are you an immediate save person?
No, I'm not.
So you have a bunch of numbers floating in your phone?
I wouldn't say a bunch, but maybe some.
Yeah. I've definitely had that where I'm like, oh God, I've definitely texted that person. And you try to remember what the text is and search the actual text of the text.
That's what I do. I search.
Yeah, it's tough. All right, that's our show. Hope you have an amazing weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday.